Franz Truffaut once said that cinema was a combination of truth and spectacle. That definition seems like the most appropriate to describe the work of director Christopher Nolan, a director who throughout the years has demonstrated the perfect ability to balance what he wants to say and pure mind-blowing spectacle. Mr. Nolan has stated in several interviews since the beginning of his career that he, like many of us, fell in love with cinema through blockbuster films, specifically Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey and George Lucas's Star Wars. It is interesting that these two films have influenced him the most, as it shows his appreciation for both very substantial, meditative films and light-hearted, grandiose adventure films. This constant pursuit of creating films that live somewhere in the middle should not be a surprise to anyone. The work of Mr. Nolan lies somewhere in between films that are critically acclaimed by both critics and audiences, while maintaining all of his creative integrity. But, make no mistake, Christopher Nolan is a precise director, and he has a distinct ability to put whatever he wants to say on screen very, very clearly. But he is not in a constant pursuit to please the audience. Instead, he uses film in a very cathartic way, as a way to explore some of his fears, preoccupations, interests, and artistic desires in ways that he could not possibly explore in real life. From a voyeuristic aspiring writer, an unreliable investigator, a bad detective, a stage magician, a mind infiltrator, a secret spy, and a scientist with desires to save the human race, Chris Nolan projects himself in each and every single one of his characters, and almost every protagonist in his films is a stoic, quiet man with a fancy suit much like himself. This is very noticeable even on his first film, the no-budget indie, Following. The themes explored by Nolan include idealism, human strength, the search for an objective truth, paranoia, obsession, memory, dreams, and the future of mankind, all of which are explored in a non-conventional fashion with out-of-order narratives that work as a puzzle. Nolan, just like Quentin Tarantino, has taken from literature the concept of having flashbacks and non-chronological narratives as a way to enrich the main story they are trying to tell, not in a gimmicky way, but in a way that heightens the cinematic experience. The out-of-order structure helps the story unfold right before your eyes, creating suspense and mystery by the withholding and slow revelation of information, or like in The Prestige, where each flashback has a very precise function to reveal plot twists that work as magic trick themselves, while moving the narrative forward and adding depth to the characters. Since the release of his first film in 1998, Nolan has stood out not only for the themes and narrative structures of his films, but also for his dedication and very unique approach to filmmaking. Mr. Nolan never went to film school. That is because he could not get into film school. Instead, he studied English literature, which could be an explanation as to why writing is one of his strengths. And for someone who did not receive a formal education in filmmaking, Chris is someone who has a very traditional approach when filming, choosing to wear a full suit when directing, as if he was a businessman, a tradition followed by the old masters like Alfred Hitchcock. Mr. Nolan also has an incredible discipline on set, choosing to work with analog tools for the most part, and in an era when the film industry started using CGI in every film, not as a tool, but as a weapon, for the simple fact that it was a novelty, cheap and easy to use. Nolan went against the trends of the industry, and instead, he chooses practical effects over computer-generated effects, capturing everything in camera when possible, only opting to use CGI as a tool to enhance that which is already there. This is one of the reasons why even his older films with big action pieces have aged so well, such as the case with The Dark Knight and the scene of the flipping truck, a scene that to this day takes your breath away.
He missed!
Christopher Nolan is one of the biggest and most vocal of celluloid film in the digital era. He is not in a crusade to replace digital cameras with celluloid film cameras, but in a crusade to preserve celluloid as a medium and an option to shoot movies with. especially for future generations. I personally think this is beautiful, as I think that preserving film as a medium and as an artifact, like the work done by the Film Foundation, is imperative to keep records of our cultural heritage. It should be no surprise that Nolan is such a big fan of celluloid, especially 65mm and 70mm film, which Nolan popularized almost single-handedly with the help of James Cameron in the last decade with the use of IMAX cameras to shoot his films. Mr. Nolan has pushed the boundaries of storytelling, structure, fantasy, and the technology involved with the creation of cinema, but he is also a true auteur and an actor's director, as noted by Kenneth Branagh during an interview about the book The Nolan Variation. During the interview, Branagh describes how during the filming of Tenet, looking at Nolan direct was like looking at Maradona play soccer, in the sense that he was going so fast. He seems to slow down time when he was still working, directing a set so huge and complex that it was almost like a military operation. Yet, in the middle of all that controlled chaos, Nolan was still able to make some time and carefully answer questions from Branagh and give him his full attention while everything else on set kept moving. There is no doubt that the passion, attention, and discipline that Christopher Nolan puts into all his work is what led him from being a film enthusiast to becoming one of the greatest filmmakers of this era. One thing I have found fascinating about Chris Nolan, besides all the previously mentioned, is how he has been able to survive in an industry where non-conventional films like his usually fail commercially. Yet, he is a director that has gone from one side of the spectrum to the other, from filming his debut film with little less than $6,000 to directing films with budgets of millions of dollars. He has found success on both sides, showing us that sometimes budget is just a state of mind, and that cinema is book made with ideas. The only thing we need is a good story that can be supported and told with the budget and resources available to us. The monetary success of his movies has proven to be quite profitable on a personal level, as now, with the reputation he has built for himself, he was able to negotiate profit points for his films. What this means is that he takes a certain percentage of the profit of all his films, regardless of how they perform at the box office.
Where's my money, bitch? I ain't gonna keep asking nice!
On top of this, he has also managed to become a producer, such as the case with his last film, Oppenheimer, which he directed and produced, thus giving him even more creative control of the picture and the allocation of its resources. Cinema is a director's medium, but even then, producers have a lot of creative control over the director, which is why more and more directors often choose to also become producers to ensure full control of the project. Despite all of this and being one of the highest grossing directors of all time, Christopher Nolan actually has quite a humble origin. As mentioned previously, he did not go to film school, and although he has kept most details about his personal life close to his chest, it is known that before his big break in 1998, Chris worked as a director for corporate training videos, which gave him all the necessary experience in terms of technical know-how and workflow, which he would then use to direct his magnum opus, Following, which he shot during the weekends through the course of a year. The reason we took Nolan so long to complete principal photography on his first film is the fact that he and all his friends involved had full-time jobs during the week. As a result, weekends were the only time in which Nolan could roll cameras, as he was funding the film himself and could not allow himself to stop working. Otherwise, he would run out of the necessary money to buy the rolls of 16mm film used to shoot the film. His job as a corporate video director and the experience of shooting his no-budget film is what gave Nolan the toolset, skills, and techniques that he would carry over and apply to his bigger films from The Dark Knight to Interstellar, but also allow him to survive before his success as a director. We can say that Christopher Nolan has been preparing for his career since he was a child. As he has mentioned before, he began making films as a kid using his father's Super 8 camera, doing a little bit of stop-motion animation, some live action, but there has never really been a period in Christopher Nolan's life where he fully stopped making films. They only got bigger, more sophisticated, and quote unquote, hopefully better. So, in theory, the success of Christopher Nolan is a result of a lifetime's work. But every person is different. Every person advances in their career at a different pace than others, and everyone starts at different points in their life. Some sooner than later, and vice versa. But it is never too late to pick up a camera and start experimenting with narrative and ways to express yourself. As of right now, only time will tell what is next for Christopher Nolan, as he is still fresh off the success of his latest film, Oppenheimer, which holds a record for being one of the highest grossing rated R films of all time, and being one of the highest grossing films of last year. It is a film that won him the much deserved Oscar this year, and more importantly, it has sparked academic conversation and scientific conversation about physics, atomic energy, history, and whether the bombing of a country to win a war was justified or not. As was the case with his latest film, an Interstellar, which also started a lot of scientific argument about astronomy. The films by Nolan feel important. They feel honest, genuine, grandiloquent, and overall like an event. It is this feeling of his films being a cultural event that made me pick Christopher Nolan as a role model, an inspirational figure who does something I would like to do. He is someone that I have admired since I was a kid, and quite frankly, he is a person who made the blockbusters that served as a gateway that made me fall in love with cinema. One of the first memories I have of watching a movie at a cinema is watching his 2005 film, Batman Begins. It was the dark, gothic images, the music, and the story which I did not fully understand at the time that made me realize I was watching something special. After all, I think it is impossible to watch his Dark Knight trilogy or any of his films without feeling like you're watching something important, something that is culturally charged, and something that matters. And in an era where we are constantly being asked to turn our brains off when watching movies for the sake of entertainment, Christopher Nolan is here to challenge us, to make us think, and to remind us to keep dreaming.